What's going on, guys? For the first video of the year, I thought I would take the opportunity to make a video of all three of my Indiana Jones style bullwhips. This mighty trio consists of an 8-foot modern Indy by Paul Nolan at MidWestWhips, a 9-foot Raiders of the Lost Ark model by Blake Bruning at Trinity Whip Co, and a 10-foot standard production Indy model by Joseph Strain at Northern Whip Co. I really got to admit, guys, this is the perfect trio to have in my collection personally for Indiana Jones style whips. All of these are just fantastic in many, many ways. Not only for functionality, but personal specs, especially for the custom Raiders that I have here. I think Blake really nailed all of the specs for a Raiders style. Back in 2016, when I ordered this from Paul, I really didn't know much about Indy whips. I just knew I wanted one. That's about it. But all of this just perfectly matches all of the standard specs for an Indy style. And along with that too, same for the Joseph Strain standard production. These were modeled after the Temple of Doom and Last Crusade whips. And I think that is pretty good too. Now, let's just go ahead and go back to the Paul Nolan whip here. So again, this is the modern Indy style that Paul offers on MidWestWhips.com. It has the standard 8-inch nail spike in the handle, a 2-belly, 2-bolster, and 12-plat overlay, ending in a 6-point hitch, I would say about a 30-inch white hide fall, and a black nylon cracker. That is pretty standard for any given Indiana Jones whip, as well as the wrist loop, although these are all very thin, nothing like a David Morgan, but that's quite okay. Let's start down with the heel knot here. I know that Paul does not pack any lead into his heel knots, so this makes it a little bit more thong heavy. In fact, I think this is the closest I have to a David Morgan, and I do believe David uses lead in the heel knots, but in terms of like the way the whip moves and the way it throws out, I think it's just very crisp to the crack, and it's even thicker around the hitch, which is indicative of a David Morgan model. So I do enjoy that. And this is still the same fall that I had when I got it back in 2016. I never changed it. I've just really been very adamant about hydrating it, and it's in really great shape. I think the only thing I've ever replaced on it was the cracker. I took a really hard cattleman's to it once at the park, and it flung off, so I had to, of course, tie on a new one. And I think this is the second longest handle out of all three of these whips. The Raiders is the longest, and the Joseph Strain is the third. Next, let's go ahead and talk about my 9-foot Raiders by Blake. This is just a very, very solid dynamite whip. Let's look at that heel knot. This is pretty close to a thinner model of a Raiders. It has a really skinny neck above that, and it tapers all the way up. And you can clearly see right before the transition, it flares out to the swell. And then it has a really nice even transition down to the hitch, except for the 1/4 mark. Blake purposely made it just a little bit thicker than the average whip, and this helps with a lot of throws. I think it's a pretty good thing to have. I feel like if Indiana Jones was going to carry a whip and he was going to grab a lot of things to either, take care of the bad guys, let's say, or if he was going to swing across a chasm to escape, then you would definitely want to have that 1/4 transition extended a bit to help with those throws. And that's regardless if you're an expert with whips or not. I just think it's really nice to have. This also has give or take 30-inch white hide fall and his nylon crackers. I do enjoy those. It's also like let's take a look at this hitch. He makes a very distinct fall hitch. He takes the last key strand and wraps it around twice rather than once. So this takes up a little bit of length, and then he leaves maybe about 1/3 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch. It's kind of hard to tell through the camera, but he leaves that through the eye, so nothing really gets caught up on anything. I know sometimes when I crack whips, the cracker, if it's not aligned correctly, it'll get caught under that key strand. And if it's long enough, it'll really tangle up on itself, and obviously you have to stop for a second and fix that. Again, all of these whips have thinner wrist loops. This is just a modern thing on a lot of whips. I also asked Blake for a leather toggle, just to almost like an homage to David Morgan. I really do like that, and it was pretty cool when I got it. He put his business card on there, much like the Morgan whips nowadays. This also has a 14 diamond count in the handle. That is highly indicative of a Raiders. I would say anything from a Raiders ranges from 14 to almost 16 diamonds in the handle. I could be wrong with the 16, but I have at least seen 15. And the darker transition knot. Very, very nice. I almost feel like at times it's a Bernardo Del Carpio whip. So saying that, I'll, just he makes a really nice screen accurate whip, and yeah, it's really nice. Last but certainly not least is the 10-foot Joseph Strain standard production Indy whip. This is a very solid build. For being 10 feet, I've never cracked a long whip like this before, and it just flows very, very nicely from the hand all the way down to the nylon cracker and white hide fall for the norm. That's pretty standard for Indy whips also. Really like his wrist loops. They're still thin, but they feel very dense, which makes up for the width. And one thing I love about Joe's whips is the shape of his heel knots. I mean, packed with lead and just symmetric all the way around. It feels very great when you're throwing the whip. Very easy to hold. And I'm not positive on this, but I think Joe might splice or split his decorative knots to make it very flush with the body. As you can see, compared to my Raiders by Blake, it is a little thicker, looks a little more rugged, but this one's more classy, I would say. Just love the way it sits on there. And of course, this is a 12 plat. Not sure if I mentioned it, the Raiders is 12 plat. All of these are 12 plat. And this one has a 12 diamond count in the handle, which is more of a Last Crusade. I would say Last Crusade is about 12 to 13. And I forgot what this one has here. Let's go back to the Paul Nolan. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Actually near 15. That 15th one is cut off by the transition, but I still count that. And that doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't magically make the handles longer by any means. It just means that the strands are cut a little more slim. I would say if this one was cut a little more slim per strand, it would almost be a 15. But anyways, going back to the strain. A thin neck above the heel. And a slight swell there. I just love the way the swells look on a strain whip. It's very nice. And the patina, I was so amazed when I pulled this out of the box and saw the patina. It just looks very old. I think it's I was told it was 8 to 10 years old, and it still looks like it's only a few months. You know, this is only going on half a year old, and it's almost matched in terms of color and, you know, I would say use, because of course a whip doesn't get dirty unless it's used. You can see almost a little bit of that color change. We have the natural tan, and then it almost turns to a whiskey because of all that use and all the Picard that sets into it. I've already put a couple coats on here, so that's why it's a little darker now. Here's one last look at all of them. Just a very nice little trio of Indy whips. So again, we have this 8-foot Paul Nolan modern Indy. We have the 9-foot Raiders of the Lost Ark by Blake at Trinity Whip Co. And we have the 10-foot Joseph Strain standard production Indy by Joseph Strain. I believe I already said that, so that's repetitive. My apologies. Of Northern Whip Co. One final thing I would like to discuss before we conclude this video. Blake and Steve Townsend have discussed this before. You know, any given whip maker who has been doing it for a while and consider themselves professional can give you the works of an Indy whip. But it takes a little bit more of information, I guess you could say, to get the real specs that you might want. So anyone can just make an 8-inch nail spike and, you know, plat some leather over that to make an Indy whip. But if you're looking for something specific, then you really gotta let them know what you're talking about. So saying that too, I believe it's Blake's Joseph Strain video. They show, I would say, about 5 or 6 different strain whips, all in the same model. I think only a couple of them are a different style in terms of like specs, like the Raiders or the Crystal Skull. But, you know, typically they plat right up to where they see the swell in the belly and start going to a herringbone. But if you're looking for something a bit longer, let them know, because they can do it. Otherwise, they're just gonna, again, go up to the swell and switch over to the herringbone and call it good. So I matched them up right here with the heel knots as best as I could. Now we can see as I guide my camera up the handles, again, this is, you know, proving what I was just talking about. So on this one, of course, this was just a classic production, or standard rather. So what Joe did was, you know, found that swell in the belly and switched over. And I did ask Blake, of course, for Raider specs. Actually, I did ask him for something relative to a Joseph Strain. So I would say this is close to that. And there's not really much of a handle swell here on the Nolan. But again, same concept, you know. It all has the same specs, the same nail spike, the same 12 plat overlay. You really just gotta let them know if you're looking for something shorter or longer. And yeah, I digress from that. I just wanted to show that real quick too. I believe also I did say the Paul Nolan was the second longest, but it looks like it actually might be the first. So in perfect order too. So we have the Paul, the longest, the Raiders in the middle, and the classic production Indy on the right. You guys probably were not expecting to see my face in this video, but I wanted to give a shout out to David Garrison of Garrison Hatters. I went ahead and fixed the brim a bit. I drenched it with water and shaped it overnight. And now it just looks phenomenal on my head. So thanks, David. Love this hat very much. This is probably my best hat. But yeah, so thanks for watching. Of course, I appreciate you all for the views, the likes, the shares, and the subscriptions. Let's keep that going, you know. Check out Blake's channel for a lot of whip content and more information on Indiana Jones whips. Steve Townsend of Townsend Handcrafted Whips, very informative and very good at whip making as well. And Joe is retired from whip making, but if you ever have any questions, comments, or potentially concerns with, I suppose, Indy whips or any sort of whip, you can contact him. Same with Paul. Sorry, I forgot to mention him. Great whip maker as well. Go ahead and contact him for any questions, comments, concerns. All of these whip makers are great, very reliable, and have built their credibility for me over the last couple years. I just recently started talking to Blake earlier this year, but I have been aware of his work as well as Steve's. Of course, I've contacted Paul numerous times, starting back in, what was that, 2016, that I said in this video already. Anyways, yeah, so thanks for watching. We will see you in the next video.